correct my memory, all the communities that we call legacy communities, with the exception of Ileton and are in the primary zone with the exception of Rio Vista and Bethel Island. Bethel Island has a piece.
Ileton is not in the primary zone. It's a little donut.
Oh, that's right. It was a carve-out. It was a carve-out.
And actually, the delta portions of Rio Vista are in the primary zone.
That's that small piece.
Yeah, right along the shoreline.
Under the Protection Commission's boundary changes, all of Rio Vista would be coming in.
I'm not familiar with their
Primary
recommendation.
Zone? Primary zone. No? Didn't you pick up that recommendation? Rio Vista? Mike Machado.
The Rio Vista wanted part of the city in the primary zone, which is along the waterfront. The recommendation was never adopted by the council, nor was it put forward as part of the report.
But it was forwarded, you say, as part of the...
Was not.
Okay.
And the reason being is that the request was ad hoc. It was not a formal request from the city council.
Oh, I see.
But Ileton was a part of that.
Ileton was a part. If I might add, if I'm hearing the discussion correctly, there's a proposed expansion of the boundaries that are now in existence for the legacy communities that are in the primary zone. The 1992 Act specified that the Land Use Resource Management Plan that was developed by the Commission, which is to find consistency for development within the 5 Delta counties, was to be just those areas at that time that were designated for development within those legacy communities. An expansion beyond that would be inconsistent with the Land Use Resource Management Plan. Any proposal by any county to go beyond what's been designated as the planning area for those legacy communities would still have to come before the Commission for a finding of consistency with respect to the Resource Management Plan. So I would hope that the Council would consider not expanding beyond that which is in the Resource Management Plan. Otherwise, I think we have a conflict within the Commission and the Council.
Compare, if you would, for me, Mike. Tell me again the differences between the Resource Management Plan boundaries and the designated county boundaries, or in the case of Ileton, I guess, city.
Ileton's separate. It's incorporated. It's the donut out there in the Delta. The other ones are consistent with what the county had designated as of the 1992 Act.
Okay, then the question is, this proposal goes beyond that.
That's what my understanding.
Expanding the boundaries to current county general plan designation.
No, that's incorrect. I think
the boundaries.
Go ahead.
The boundaries that we've shown here are the ones that are in the current county general plans, which are, because they're long-standing, they are consistent with the Delta Protection Commission's plan, and so we're really trying to create a unified system here.
Yeah, my preface of comments was I was understanding the discussion that it was go beyond what was in.
It was a request from Walnut Grove, which staff does not support.
Well, Pat.
Yeah, and from the Commission's perspective, the recommendation that could be considered by the Council would be that the boundaries for the legacy communities be the same as those within the Resource Management Plan as defined by the 1992 Act.
Okay. Now that is different from what we have here. You've got a clause in here on build-up areas, effective date of this policy. Now that's current. I am inclined to believe that the boundaries that existed in 1992, Pat's statute, were recognized in Machado legislation and the Resource Management Plan ought to be a more proper designation of legacy town boundaries.
Well, our general plans have to comport with the Land Use Resource Management Plan. So I think going back to Dan's point, certainly what Mike's saying as well, and Chair, I think those things are, if they're not perfectly in alignment, they're pretty darn close right now. I mean, I would think that there's not a whole lot of difference. And there shouldn't be. I guess our general plans are supposed to comport with the resource management.
I'm a little bit of the same victim that Mr. Zuckerman was a victim of the voluminous materials and not knowing where to look at this point. But
can I make a suggestion on this one? I'd like to know whether the boundaries that the staff is proposing to us under this language, I'm putting aside Bethel Island for a minute because we're going to have a separate discussion on them, but the boundaries that are described here, including the discussion of build-up areas, are they bigger or smaller than the resource management plan, which I gather incorporated or referenced the 1992 status of the legacy towns?
Yes, and that was defined in that legislation
Yeah.
to be the areas to be
We can check
incorporated in
this.
research management.
I don't have a copy of the resource management plan with me. I'm not sure even that it uses the term legacy community. But we can go back and see if it includes a map that identifies the boundaries of these towns out there. We were trying to do with the understanding that the county general plans were consistent with the resource management plan,
But
was
they
to
may not.
acknowledge the existing framework for land use within those areas.
I mean,
If it's point of information, the counties are in the process of
changing.
changing their delta element. Those are coming for the commission for finding of consistency with the resource management plan. The standard for the communities within the primary zone that are subject to the resource management plan is the definition that comes out of the 1992 Act.
Well, I don't know. Setting aside Bethel Island for a moment, which I think we should actually discuss separately and next, my recommendation is we put this item over, get an answer to the question of what the boundaries are compared to the 92 boundaries, and see if there are changes.
Sure.
That's a good suggestion. That's a good suggestion. Any objection, members? Okay, that'll be tomorrow. Okay. Alrighty. Now, on Bethel Island, you were suggesting, as we learned at the last meeting where we spent hour and a half in general talking about and hearing witnesses from Bethel Island, staff is suggesting somewhat different treatment of Bethel Island because of unique characteristics. And maybe you'd run us through that again, and then we have a witness who has dutifully stayed here all these many hours through other subject matters to testify. Mr. Ray.
Yeah. I thought I would begin this by, and we've kind of jumped ahead of the discussion, but I thought I would begin this by talking a little bit about what do we mean by legacy communities. Because it was a term that first originated in the first staff draft of the Delta Plan, at least in terms of your conversations about it. And you talked about them being towns with distinct natural, agricultural, and cultural heritage. I refer to them twice as towns there in the first draft plan. In DPC's Economic Sustainability Plan, they reference legacy communities, and they call them towns that provide key services and support functions. In DPC's National Heritage Area Feasibility Study, they describe legacy communities as small, unincorporated towns. And so the first time the actual towns are actually listed any place is in the Conservancies Act, which has been referenced earlier, and it identifies 10 legacy communities, all of which are distinct towns. But in Bethel Island, we've got a term that describes an island, and so the policies that you had been developing, which were trying to create some flexibility for new opportunities within the legacy towns, because recognizing the importance for some economic vitality there, providing variations from policies that might normally apply. If we were to think of all of Bethel Island as a legacy community, might indicate, again, that it would be an appropriate location for a wider variety of development. Interestingly, this term, which you began talking about and others in the Delta began talking about, has been picked up in the last few months, in the last legislative session, in the government code, which by Senator Wolf, of all people, probably listening to this conversation, worrying about small communities around the state who get inadequate attention for planning for public services and other needs from their local government. And so she incorporated into the planning code definition for legacy community that's an unincorporated, isolated community that's inhabited and it's existed for at least 50 years, and it's got no less than 10 dwellings adjacent or in close proximity to one another. So all of the definitions that are available in either code or in the language that has been used refers to legacy communities as towns of one kind or another, a community with residences in close proximity to another. And so that's how we've always thought of this term. Interestingly, what Senator Wolk's bill requires is that local governments, as they update their general plans as part of their regular housing element renewals on a regular schedule, that they'll have to that the local governments will have to identify their legacy communities and prepare plans for providing services for them as well as meeting their housing needs. And so as local governments do that through their general plan, the kind of simple descriptions that we're doing now will be refined over time. Now, in Bethel Island, our concern has been that the entire island includes very large tracts of open farmlands, not a community, the area we would think would be suitable for development. In addition, the levees are, as we pointed out, don't meet the HMP standard. The Contra Costa General Plan points out that there are other service limitations in terms of water and sanitary services out there. And so the exemptions that we've generally provided for legacy communities seemed inappropriate to apply to all of Bethel Island. So we had proposed, and you can see this in attachment 3 to the staff report, we had initially proposed a boundary for a Bethel Island legacy community that included the commercial core as well as this Delta Cove subdivision, which is a large, intensely developed waterside area that will include both waterside residences as well as boating opportunities. The county, in reviewing that, suggested first a preference that no, as their county general plan includes all of Bethel Island within their urban limit line, that would be their first preference on how we would deal with that. Again, we think that's not a good idea. It would be contrary to how we've thought of legacy communities. We haven't thought of large tracts of rural agricultural land as being part of the legacy community. We've thought of them as being towns. And they said Plan B, we would suggest that the area that their current general plan designates for, that's undeveloped now, that's designated for residential use in the general plan, that would be the area on the eastern tip of the island, be included within the legacy community boundary. And again, our reaction to that is that includes areas with relatively large tracts of undeveloped land. It's not how we've thought of the legacy communities in the past. But we have adjusted the boundary. We have suggested to pick up a couple additional commercial areas that Contra Costa County's proposal suggested.
That's the area in mustard or yellow, right?
That would be...
Oh, I'm sorry.
That would be the area
Excuse me.
that's immediately north
Got it.
of the Delta Cove subdivision that we had initially, I think, left out, and some of the retail areas that are west of the Bethel Island Road. Then Councilmember Fiorini suggested at our last meeting, well, I would think of a legacy community as being not this new subdivision. We heard a lot of thoughts from people at the last meeting that, hey, this is not even developed. Why would you call it part of the community? And so suggesting, why don't we focus on a smaller commercial core as being the legacy community? And so we've got that fourth choice here. And so those are the 4 options that we've presented to you.
Okay.
2 are recommended by Contra Costa County, 1 by the staff, and then the final is a much smaller area
Right.
that responds to Councilmember Fiorini's suggestion.
Okay.